In the sun-scorched borderlands of Texas, a deadly confrontation is about to unfold when Los Sangre cartel targets what they think is just another vulnerable ranch. 8 months pregnant and recently widowed, Emily Reeves seems like easy prey. But they're about to learn a devastating lesson. Before becoming a rancher's wife, she was Captain Emily Reeves, one of the most lethal Force Recon Marines in Afghanistan. Now she's fighting for 2 lives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The October sun hadn't yet crested the horizon when Emily Reeves began her morning routine at the Double R Ranch. Her boots crunched softly on the gravel as she made her rounds, one hand resting instinctively on her 8-month pregnant belly, the other holding a steaming cup of coffee. Her German shepherd, Shadow, padded silently beside her, alert and watchful as always. At 34, Emily carried herself with the fluid grace that came from years of military training, pregnancy doing little to diminish the awareness she'd developed during 3 combat tours. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, her blue eyes constantly scanning the landscape as she walked the property line. Old habits died hard, especially out here in Diamondback County, less than 40 miles from the Mexican border. The ranch had been her late husband's dream. James Reeves had grown up here, had planned to raise their child in the same hills and valleys that had shaped his childhood. But 6 months ago, a drunk driver had shattered those dreams, leaving Emily alone with a growing belly and 500 acres of tough Texas ranch land to manage. The local ranchers had their doubts at first, a pregnant widow running one of the largest spreads in the county seemed like a recipe for failure. They didn't know about the skills she'd honed leading Marine Force reconnaissance teams through the mountains of Afghanistan, or the iron will that had earned her the call sign Ghost during operations too classified to discuss. Shadow's ears suddenly pricked forward, drawing Emily's attention to fresh tire tracks in the soft earth near her east fence line. The tracks were deep, made by heavy vehicles, not the usual ranch trucks that frequented these parts. Her mind automatically catalogued details. 3 distinct vehicles, probably SUVs, recent within the last 6 hours. "What do you think, boy?" she murmured, kneeling carefully to examine the tracks more closely. Shadow growled softly, confirming her unease. The morning silence suddenly felt heavier, charged with possibility. Her satellite phone buzzed. Miguel Hernandez, her foreman. "Ms. Emily, you need to hear this. My cousin works Border Patrol. Says Los Sangre cartel's been moving north, buying up ranches along the smuggling routes. Those who don't sell." He paused significantly. "Well, accidents happen." Emily straightened, her mind already shifting into the tactical awareness she'd relied on during combat operations. Los Sangre was notorious. They'd carved out their territory through brutal efficiency, using a combination of overwhelming force and sophisticated business tactics. They weren't just criminals. They were an army, complete with former Special Forces operators and military-grade equipment. "Thanks, Miguel. Take the day off. Get your family out of the area for a bit." Her tone was calm, but her mind was already racing through scenarios, analyzing angles of approach, considering defensive positions. Inside the ranch house, behind a false panel she'd installed her first week here, Emily accessed her personal armory. Force Recon had taught her to be prepared, and James had understood, had even helped her set up the hidden room. Her fingers ran over familiar equipment, combat gear, tactical communications, weapons she'd hoped never to need again. The ranch's security system was more sophisticated than anyone suspected. Motion sensors covered key approaches, cameras monitored, blind spots, and she had enough supplies cached around the property to hold out for weeks if necessary. To most eyes, it looked like standard ranch security. To trained observers, it was a masterpiece of tactical preparation. Sarah Chen, her nearest neighbor, pulled up in her weathered pickup just as Emily finished her morning check. "Emily! Thank God you're here. The Martinez place, they're gone. Just packed up overnight. But there are men there now, black SUVs, guys who look military." Emily nodded, already connecting the dots. The Martinez ranch controlled the main valley access point. Combined with her land, it would give the cartel a perfect distribution route, complete with legitimate cover for vehicle traffic and storage facilities. "They'll be here soon," she said quietly, her hand absently rubbing her belly, where her child shifted restlessly. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me. That USB drive I gave you last month? It's time. Get it to Sheriff Cooper, but wait until tomorrow." Sarah's eyes widened. She didn't know what was on the drive, but she understood its importance. "Emily, you can't face them alone, not in your condition." Emily's smile was slight but fierce. "I'm not alone." Her hand touched her belly again. "And they're about to learn that pregnant doesn't mean helpless. Sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones that appear vulnerable." As Sarah drove away, Emily made 3 calls to numbers she hadn't used in years. Her old team would come. They'd fought together through the worst battles in Afghanistan, had become more than fellow Marines. They were family. Ghost. The first. Voice that answered was instantly alert, professional. "Been a while." "Blade," she replied, using her former teammate's call sign. "Remember that favor you owe me. Time to pay up." Shadow barked suddenly, alerting her to approaching vehicles. Through her security feeds, she watched 3 black SUVs rolling slowly past her gate, Los Sangre's advance team, doing their reconnaissance, marking their next target. They saw what everyone saw: a pregnant widow, alone and vulnerable on a valuable piece of land. Emily Reeves smiled grimly, checking her weapons with practiced efficiency. They'd learned what others had learned too late in Afghanistan, that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one you've already dismissed as harmless. As twilight painted the Texas sky in shades of amber and gold, Emily Reeves prepared for a war she'd seen coming since the first whispers of cartel movement reached her. In her hidden command center, converted from an old storm cellar beneath the ranch house, she reviewed security feeds while completing her preparations with practiced precision. Each movement was calculated, efficient, the same way she'd prepared. For operations in Kandahar and Helmand Province, the satellite phone buzzed again. "Ghost, it's Blade. Teams mobilized. 6 hours out, maybe 5 if Kane's flying skills haven't gotten rusty." "Major James Blade." Harrison's voice carried the familiar tension of pre-mission briefings. "But something else you should know. Los Sangres brought in Viper." Emily's hand stilled on her tactical vest. Viper, Carlos, the Snake, Ramirez, had been one of Mexico's most elite special forces commanders before switching sides. Now he ran Los Sangre's military operations with the same precision he'd once used hunting cartels. Their paths had nearly crossed during a joint US-Mexico operation in 2015, but she'd never faced him directly. "They're not just looking for a smuggling route," she concluded, mind racing through implications. "They're setting up a forward operations base. My ranch, the Martinez place, they're creating a defensive perimeter." "Explains the hardware." "They're bringing in," Blade confirmed. "Satellite shows vehicle movements consistent with heavy weapons. These aren't just thugs, Ghost. Viper's brought his A-team." Emily moved to the ranch house's 2nd floor, using her scope to survey the gathering darkness. Her property sat at a crucial junction, controlling access to 3 valleys that led deeper into Texas. From a tactical perspective, it was priceless. The cartel wasn't just being opportunistic, they were being strategic. Through her thermal imaging, she caught movement at her north fence line. 2 figures, moving with military precision, placing something at regular intervals. Her security system identified the objects. Motion sensors. They were mapping her ranch's blind spots, preparing for a professional operation. "They're not waiting for negotiations," she told Blade. "Viper's already got recon teams on my property. Tell the team to approach from the west, through the old mining tunnels. I'll have everything prepared." After ending the call, Emily moved through her house with practiced efficiency, activating defensive measures she'd spent months installing. To most eyes, the ranch was a simple working operation. They wouldn't see the reinforced walls, the bulletproof windows, or the carefully planned fields of fire covering every approach. Her satellite phone chirped, a text from an old contact in Border Patrol. "Large convoy headed north, heavy weapons, professional operators, watch your back." The baby kicked, as if sensing her tension. Emily paused, one hand on her belly, the other checking her weapons. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "Your mum's got this. Sometimes the best defense is making them underestimate you." Through her security feeds, she watched 3 more SUVs roll past her gate, moving slowly. Reconnaissance marking firing positions and escape routes. They were good. She counted at least 4 former military among them, their movements betraying their training. But she'd spent years studying how cartels operated, analyzing their tactics. She knew what came next. Right on cue, a black Mercedes pulled up to her gate. Unlike the tactical teams, this was about show, intimidation through the appearance of legitimate business. Emily straightened her shirt, checked her concealed holster, and moved to the porch. Time to play her role. Javier Ortiz stepped out. Of the Mercedes, his expensive suit out of place against the ranch's rugged backdrop. His smile was practiced, professional, but his eyes were cold as he approached. Emily recognized him from intelligence briefings, Los Sangre's chief negotiator, known for making offers that couldn't be refused. "Mrs. Reeves," he called out pleasantly, "I hope I'm not interrupting your evening." His English was perfect, his manner courteous. Behind him, 2 men tried to look non-threatening despite their obvious tactical gear, partially hidden under jackets. "Mr. Ortiz," Emily replied, one hand resting on her belly, playing up her apparent vulnerability. "What brings Los Sangre's top business representative to my humble ranch?" His smile flickered slightly. She wasn't supposed to know who he was, but he recovered quickly. "I represent an investment group interested in agricultural properties. In this region, your ranch particularly has certain strategic value." Emily noticed his men subtly spreading out, establishing coverage positions, professional but predictable. Through her earpiece, connected to her security system, she heard reports of more teams moving into position around her property. Viper was taking no chances. "Not interested in selling," Emily said simply. "Ranch has been in my husband's family too long." Ortiz stepped closer, his manner shifting ever so slightly. "Mrs. Reeves, let me be direct. We're prepared to offer $4 million, very generous considering current market values. You could give your child a wonderful life somewhere safer." The threat was subtle but clear. Emily maintained her passive expression while her mind calculated angles, positions, timing. Through her thermal imaging, she tracked his teams establishing a perimeter. 12 men, maybe more in reserve, well-equipped, well-trained, but they'd made one critical mistake. They thought they were hunting. They didn't realize they were being hunted. "Money isn't everything, Mr. Ortiz," she replied calmly. Something in her tone made him pause, that instinct that tells predators when they might actually be prey. For just a moment, he glimpsed something in her eyes. Something that didn't belong in a vulnerable widow's gaze. "Think about it," he said, recovering his composure. "You have 24 hours after that." He glanced at her pregnant belly meaningfully. "Accidents can happen, especially on isolated ranches." As the Mercedes pulled away, Emily allowed herself a small smile. Everything was proceeding exactly as she'd expected. They'd come back tonight, not waiting for her answer. Viper wouldn't risk giving her time to call for help. They'd come in force, expecting to overwhelm a helpless woman. Instead, they were walking into a trap designed by someone who'd spent years studying their tactics, who knew exactly how they'd respond to apparent vulnerability. Blade and her team were coming, but she didn't plan to wait for them. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the best defense is a devastating offense. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As darkness settled over the Double R Ranch, Emily Reeves moved with practiced efficiency through her final preparations. Her years in Force Recon had taught her that victories were often won before the first shot was fired, decided in the quiet moments of preparation that others overlooked. The ranch house's security feeds showed Viper's teams establishing observation posts in the surrounding hills, exactly where she'd predicted they would choose. In her command center, she reviewed the thermal imaging displays while making adjustments to her tactical vest. The specialized maternity plate carrier had raised eyebrows when she'd commissioned it 8 months ago, but Emily believed in being prepared. Now, as she secured the modified equipment, she remembered her old commander's words: "The best warriors pray for peace, but prepare for war." The satellite phone buzzed. Kane's voice was tight with urgency. "Ghost, got some intel you need to hear. Viper's not just running this operation, he's got something to prove. Word is Los Sangre's leadership is watching this one closely. If he takes your ranch quickly, he gets promoted to running their entire northern territory." Emily processed this information while checking her weapons. He'll want to make a statement then. Show them he can handle high-risk operations with minimal casualties. That means... She paused, mind racing through implications. "Shock and awe," Kane finished. "Quick, overwhelming force. Probably try to take you alive to prove his sophistication. Make an example of how they can handle things cleanly when they want to." Through her thermal imaging, Emily tracked more vehicles arriving at the staging areas around her property. Her security system's AI analyzed their movement patterns, confirming her suspicions. These weren't cartel thugs. They moved with the discipline of trained operators. "They're setting up for a coordinated assault," she observed, noting their positioning. "Multiple teams, professional cornering tactics. Viper's not taking any chances." She moved to the ranch house's east window, using her scope to study their preparations. "But he's making assumptions based on incomplete intelligence." Shadow's low growl alerted her to movement at the perimeter. Her security feeds showed 2 of Viper's advanced teams placing breaching charges at strategic points. Standard Special Forces technique for creating multiple entry points simultaneously. They were good, but they'd missed the subtle sensors she'd installed beneath the ranch's weathered exterior. "Your team's still 4 hours out?" she asked Kane, already knowing the answer. "At least. A Ghost, we can try to speed it up, but—" "No need," Emily interrupted, her mind already formulating counter-strategies. "They'll move before then. Viper won't risk waiting until dawn." Her hand rested briefly on her belly, feeling her child's movement. "Besides, this is personal now." She moved through the ranch house's upper floor, checking her prepared positions. Each window had been carefully reinforced, each angle of approach considered and prepared. The house itself was a carefully crafted illusion. What looked like simple ranch construction concealed military-grade defensive features. A message flashed across her tactical display: "Movement at the Martinez place." Through her long-range cameras, she watched more of Viper's men unloading heavy weapons. They were establishing a command post, confident in their superior numbers and firepower. Emily allowed herself a small smile. In Afghanistan, her unit had specialized in turning enemy strengths into weaknesses. The more resources they committed, the more they had to lose. Her fingers moved across her command center's controls, activating systems that appeared to be simple ranch security, but were anything but. The baby kicked again, more insistent this time. "I know, little one," she whispered. "Your dad always said I was at my best when outnumbered. Time to show these gentlemen why they called me Ghost." Her satellite phone chirped with an encrypted message from Blade. "Third team spotted moving through the valley. Heavy weapons, demo gear. They're not planning to leave witnesses." Emily checked her watch, calculating. Viper would wait for full darkness, probably around 2200 hours. That gave her just enough time to implement the first phase of her counter-strategy. Moving to her hidden armory, she retrieved specialized equipment that would have seemed out of place in a ranch house. Cutting-edge electronic warfare gear, advanced communications interceptors, and tools that weren't supposed to exist outside of classified military operations. Through her thermal imaging, she watched Viper's men continuing their preparations, setting up interlocking fields of fire, establishing command and control networks. They were preparing for a complex military operation, bringing overwhelming force against what they assumed was a vulnerable target. "Let's see how they handle some uncertainty," Emily murmured, activating the first of her prepared surprises. Years of combat experience had taught her that even the best operators could be rattled when their carefully laid plans encountered the unexpected. The ranch's external lights suddenly failed, plunging the property into darkness. Standard procedure. Would have Viper's teams switching to night vision, exactly as she'd planned. The modified infrared strobes she'd hidden around the property would be invisible to the naked eye, but would play havoc with their equipment. Her security feeds caught the first signs of confusion in their ranks. Teams that had been moving with practiced coordination suddenly hesitated, their formations becoming ragged as their night vision gear struggled with the unexpected interference. "First lesson," Emily whispered, remembering her own training days. "Never assume you're the only one who knows how to fight in the dark." Emily Reeves stood in her darkened command center, watching thermal signatures move across her displays, like pieces on a chessboard. The ranch house had gone quiet, power apparently failed, presenting the appearance of vulnerability that Viper's teams would expect. Through her encrypted communications, she could hear their confidence growing as they prepared for what they thought would be a simple operation. "Alpha team in position," a voice crackled in Spanish, intercepted by her sophisticated surveillance. "Equipment. No movement inside. Looks like the power failure worked exactly as planned." Emily allowed herself a small smile. They thought they'd caused the blackout, never suspecting she'd deliberately crashed her own power grid to reinforce their overconfidence. Her backup systems, running silently on military-grade batteries, gave her complete situational awareness, while they thought she was blind. The baby kicked, and Emily patted her belly gently. "Steady now, little one. Your mum's about to give these gentlemen a lesson in humility." Her thermal imaging showed 24 operators moving into their final positions. Viper had arranged them in classic pincer formation, 3 teams of 8, each approaching from different angles. Professional, methodical, and completely predictable to someone who'd spent years studying cartel tactics. "Target structure appears dormant," another voice reported. "No security response to power loss. Permission to proceed with breach." Through her feeds, Emily watched Viper himself directing operations from the command post they'd established at the Martinez place. His reputation for methodical planning was evident in their preparation. Each team had specific objectives, redundant communications and clear extraction routes. "Execute in 3 minutes," Viper's distinctive voice commanded. "Remember, we want the woman alive. Los Sangre doesn't need the bad publicity of killing a pregnant widow. Just secure her, and the property is ours." Emily moved silently through her pre-planned positions, checking the specialized equipment she'd prepared. Force Recon had taught her that victory often went to the side that could control the battlefield's conditions. Her ranch wasn't just defended, it was rigged to become a weapon itself. 2 minutes, Viper announced. His teams shifted slightly, adjusting their positions for the synchronized breach. Their night vision equipment gave them confidence in the darkness, never suspecting that Emily had spent months practicing fighting blind in her own home. Shadow lay quietly in his designated position, trained to wait for specific signals. The German Shepherd's military background matched his owner's. He'd served 3 tours as a combat dog before Emily had adopted him. 1 minute came the command. Emily could hear the subtle sounds of final equipment checks, breaching charges being armed. They were good, she had to give them that. Under normal circumstances, their approach would have been virtually perfect. But these weren't normal circumstances. Execute. The night erupted in choreographed chaos as 3 teams moved simultaneously. Breaching charges detonated at multiple entry points, designed to stun and disorient the occupants. Flash bangs followed, their brilliant flares lighting up the darkness. But Emily's house wasn't there. Where solid walls should have been, the teams encountered sophisticated holographic screens, military prototype technology that wasn't supposed to exist. Outside of classified research labs, their breaching charges detonated harmlessly against empty air, while the real ranch house stood offset by exactly 3 meters from where their intelligence said it should be. The resulting confusion was immediate and total. Teams that had practiced their entry paths found themselves stumbling in unexpected directions. Coordinated movements became chaotic as operators crashed into walls that shouldn't have been there. "What the hell?" Viper's voice carried genuine shock. "Reform!" Reform now. But Emily had already launched her counterattack. Electromagnetic pulses, carefully calibrated to affect only active night vision equipment, left the teams effectively blind. The ranch's irrigation systems, modified with military-grade upgrades, activated in carefully planned sequences, turning solid ground into treacherous mud at precisely the wrong moments. "She's playing with us," one of the team leaders realized, his voice carrying a note of dawning comprehension. "This isn't a ranch house, it's a kill box." Emily's voice, transmitted simultaneously across all their communication frequencies, carried the calm confidence of a predator. "Gentlemen, I'm going to give you one chance to withdraw. The next demonstration won't be non-lethal." Through her thermal imaging, she watched the teams trying to regroup, their formations now ragged and uncertain. These were trained operators, used to having every advantage. Finding themselves outmaneuvered by a supposedly vulnerable target had shaken their confidence. "Who are you?" Viper demanded, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. "Just a pregnant widow defending her home," Emily replied, allowing herself a small smile, "though your intelligence might want to look up Force Recon's ghost team sometime, particularly their female commander." The effect of her words was immediate. Emily watched Viper's thermal signature stiffen as recognition hit him. Ghost Team was a legend in special operations circles. The unit that had repeatedly outmaneuvered cartel forces across Central and South America, always striking without warning and vanishing without trace. "Impossible," Viper muttered, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Ghost Team was deactivated years ago." "The team was," Emily agreed, triggering another series of carefully planned countermeasures. "Their commander just found a quieter line of work. Until you, gentlemen, decided to threaten her home." The Texas night had erupted into a chess match between 2 tactical experts, each move and counter-move calculated with lethal precision. Emily watched through her command center as Viper reorganized his forces, adapting to the revelation of her true identity with the professional efficiency that had made him legendary in his own right. "Pull back to secondary positions," Viper commanded his teams. Defensive Formation Delta. She's not just some rancher. We're dealing with Force Recon's finest." His voice carried the weight of experience, understanding exactly what facing Ghost Team's former commander meant. Emily tracked their movements on her tactical display, noting how quickly they adjusted their strategy. Where before they had moved with aggressive confidence, now they advanced with careful precision, treating every shadow as a potential threat. Their thermal signatures showed disciplined teams moving in coordinated patterns, probing for weaknesses, rather than rushing to attack. "Quite the resume you have, Captain Reeves." Viper's voice came across the command frequency, professional respect evident in his tone. "3 tours with Force Recon, Distinguished Service Cross, more classified. Operations than most generals know about. Los Sangre's intelligence division clearly needs updating. Professional courtesy suggests you should withdraw while you can," Emily responded, her hands moving across her control systems, preparing her next sequence of defensive measures. "You've lost the element of surprise, and your men aren't equipped for the kind of fight this is about to become." Through her thermal imaging, she watched Viper direct his teams into new positions. He was good, already adapting to her defensive layout, looking for angles she might have missed. "Unfortunately, professional courtesy won't satisfy my employers," he replied, "but I'll offer you the same. Surrender now, and we'll ensure your safety. Even Los Sangre won't risk the publicity of harming a pregnant war hero." Emily allowed herself a grim smile as she activated another set of countermeasures. The ranch's perimeter defenses, disguised as ordinary agricultural equipment, began their carefully programmed sequences. Irrigation systems created zones of obscuring mist, while modified farming machinery generated electromagnetic interference in precise patterns. "Your concern is noted," she transmitted, "but apparently Los Sangre didn't brief you on Ghost Team's operational history. We don't surrender territory. Ever." Her security feeds showed Viper's response, a complex series of hand signals directing his teams into new formations. They were shifting to a more sophisticated approach, using their numbers to establish overlapping fields of fire while maintaining multiple retreat options. "You're outnumbered 4-1, Viper noted, his teams moving with practiced efficiency. "Your backup is hours away, and with respect, Captain, your current condition limits your tactical options." The baby kicked again, as if responding to the challenge. Emily patted her belly while triggering the next phase of her defense plan. "That's where you're wrong," she replied. "This child is exactly why I can't lose. Some things are worth fighting for more than others." Across her property, carefully hidden systems activated in sequence. Years of combat experience had taught her that the best defenses worked on multiple levels: physical, psychological, and tactical. The modified agricultural drones she'd positioned around the ranch began their pre-programmed patterns, their heat signatures mimicking human movement. "Multiple contacts," one of Viper's team leaders reported urgently. "New signatures appearing across all sectors." Emily watched their thermal signatures react to the false readings, their formations adjusting to counter threats that didn't exist. Force Recon had taught her that uncertainty was often more effective than direct confrontation. "Impressive tactics," Viper acknowledged, his teams responding to the phantom signatures with professional discipline. "But we both know those are decoys, well executed, but decoys nonetheless." "Are they?" Emily questioned, activating another sequence. The drones adjusted their movement patterns, now mimicking the approach vectors of a professional tactical team. "Are you certain enough to risk your men's lives on that assumption?" Through her feeds, she watched the psychological impact of her countermoves ripple through their ranks. Even professional operators could be rattled when unable to distinguish between real and artificial threats. Each false reading forced them to react as if it were genuine, exhausting their resources and disrupting their coordination. "You're playing a dangerous game, Captain," Viper warned, though she noted how his teams had shifted to more defensive positions. "Los Sangre doesn't take kindly to resistance." "And I don't take kindly to threats against my family," Emily responded, her hand resting protectively over her unborn child. "Perhaps it's time you considered what you're really fighting for, Los Sangre's profit margins or your men's lives." The tactical display showed Viper's teams continuing to react to her phantom signatures, each response forcing them to commit resources and reveal their own positions. But Emily noted the subtle shift in their behavior. They were becoming more cautious, more aware that they faced an opponent who had transformed her entire ranch into a sophisticated defensive weapon. The confrontation entered a new phase as Viper initiated his counter-strategy. Emily watched through her sophisticated monitoring systems as 3 of his elite teams began implementing advanced infiltration techniques she recognized from classified Mexican Special Forces manuals. Their approach was methodical, professional, using the ranch's natural terrain features to mask their movements. "Alpha Team, maintain suppression patterns," Viper directed. His voice carried clearly through Emily's intercepted communications. "Bravo and Charlie, execute infiltration pattern Sierra. She's good, but no one can watch every angle simultaneously." Emily allowed herself a measured smile as she monitored their advance. Her years leading Ghost Team had taught her to anticipate how professional operators thought, how they would react to various tactical situations. Viper's response was textbook perfect, which made it perfectly predictable to someone who had written some of those textbooks. "Shadow, initiate sequence Delta," she whispered to her German shepherd. The dog moved silently to his predetermined position, another piece in the complex defensive strategy about to unfold. Through her command center's displays, Emily watched the thermal signatures of Viper's teams advancing through what they thought were her defensive blind spots. "Contact team approaching West Sector," one of Viper's operators reported. "No resistance encountered." "Looks like we found a gap in her coverage." Emily's hand moved to her tactical console, fingers dancing across the controls with practiced efficiency. "Sometimes the most obvious path forward," she transmitted across their frequency, "is exactly what your opponent wants you to take." The advancing teams suddenly found themselves caught in a sophisticated trap. Motion sensors, hidden beneath the seemingly natural ground cover, triggered a cascading series of responses. Modified agricultural sprinklers activated, but instead of water, they dispersed a specialized compound that reacted with their thermal camouflage gear, effectively negating its effectiveness. "We're exposed!" The lead operator's voice carried professional concern rather than panic. "She's lighting us up like Christmas trees." Viper's response was immediate and professional. "Shift to contingency pattern echo. Maintain unit cohesion and—" He stopped abruptly as new thermal signatures appeared on their tactical displays, moving with military precision through the ranch's outer sectors. "Multiple contacts," his surveillance team reported urgently. "Professional operators moving in coordinated patterns. Sir, looks like her backup might have arrived early." Emily watched their reaction through her feeds, noting how quickly they adjusted their formations to deal with the perceived new threat. The sophisticated holographic systems she'd installed around her property were proving their worth, projecting thermal signatures that perfectly mimicked the movement patterns of a professional tactical team. "Clever," Viper acknowledged, his teams shifting to defensive positions. "But we both know Ghost Team is still hours out. These are more decoys, like the drones." "Are you willing to bet your men's lives on that assumption?" Emily responded, triggering the next phase of her defense. The holographic signatures began executing complex flanking maneuvers, moving exactly as a real tactical team would. Professional courtesy suggests you should consider the possibility that I planned for this confrontation long before tonight. Through her thermal imaging, she watched Viper's teams react to the phantom threats. Even knowing they might be facing decoys, they couldn't risk ignoring what appeared to be professional operators moving to outflank them. The psychological impact was exactly what she'd intended, forcing them to divide their attention and resources. Your reputation for tactical innovation was well earned, Viper transmitted, his voice carrying genuine professional respect. But you're still one person, pregnant, and fighting against superior numbers. Time is on our side. Emily's response was to activate another layer of her defense. Hidden speakers around the property began broadcasting sounds of movement and tactical communications, perfectly synchronized with the holographic signatures. The audio was sophisticated enough to fool even professional operators, creating the impression of a full team moving through practice formations. "You're assuming time is a factor," she replied, monitoring their reactions. "You're also assuming I'm alone. That's two potentially fatal mistakes for a tactical commander." Shadow chose that moment to begin his part of the operation, his military training evident in how he moved through the darkness. The German shepherd's barking came from multiple directions, amplified and redirected by Emily's sound system in a way that made it impossible to determine his true location. "The thing about Ghost Team," Emily continued, watching Viper's forces react to the mounting uncertainty, "is that we specialized in making enemies question everything they thought they knew about tactical situations. How many of my defenses are automated? How many are manned? Are those holographic signatures meant to distract you from real operators moving into position, or are the real operators meant to distract you from something else entirely?" The psychological pressure was beginning to show in their movements. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Every sound could signal an attack. Emily had transformed her entire ranch into a tactical uncertainty engine where nothing could be trusted and every assumption had to be questioned. The tactical situation evolved rapidly as Viper shifted his strategy, demonstrating why he'd earned his reputation among special forces operators. Emily watched through her command center as his teams began implementing an advanced counter-deception protocol she recognized from her own military training days. The sophistication of their response confirmed her initial assessment. These weren't just cartel thugs playing soldier, they were legitimate special forces operators working for the highest bidder. "All units shift to signal validation pattern Delta," Viper commanded. "Ignore thermal signatures unless verified by at least 2 additional sensor types. She's playing mind games. Time to change the rules of engagement. Deploy the new EMP-hardened equipment. Whatever tech she's running will cut through it." Emily watched their deployment with professional interest, noting how they'd adapted their gear to counter her expected capabilities. Through her displays, she observed their teams unpacking sophisticated counter-surveillance equipment, technology, that shouldn't have been available outside of military channels. They were systematically working to separate her real defenses from the deceptions she'd created, using multi-spectrum analysis and quantum detection systems. "Target structure analysis complete," one of his technical specialists reported. "Detecting multiple power signatures inconsistent with normal ranch operations. She's running military-grade equipment behind that civilian facade." "Wait. Yes, sir, these power readings, they're off the charts. This isn't just military tech, this is something else." The baby kicked vigorously, as if sensing the mounting tension. Emily placed one hand on her belly while using the other to initiate her contingency protocols. "Stay calm, little one," she whispered. "Your mom's about to show them why Ghost Team specialized in impossible situations." Sometimes the best way to win isn't through force. It's through making your opponent question everything they think they know. Her fingers danced across the tactical console, activating systems that even her former military commanders didn't know existed. The ranch's defensive perimeter suddenly came alive with technology she'd developed during her final classified missions. Quantum-entangled sensor arrays that could generate false readings capable of fooling even the most sophisticated detection. Equipment. Each system had been carefully integrated into seemingly innocent ranch equipment, creating a defensive network that defied conventional tactical analysis. "Impressive setup you're running, Captain," Viper transmitted, his teams moving with renewed confidence as their equipment began cutting through her initial deceptions. "But now we know what's real and what isn't. Your holographic signatures can't fool our updated sensors. We've trained for these kinds of counter-surveillance measures." Emily's response was to activate her third-tier defensive systems, technology that existed only in theoretical papers within the highest levels of military research. The ranch's entire electromagnetic signature shifted, creating patterns that shouldn't have been possible according to known physics. Every attempt by Viper's teams to establish a baseline for analysis was met with data that simultaneously appeared completely legitimate and utterly impossible. "The thing about deception," she broadcast on their frequency, "is that sometimes the most effective lie is showing your enemy the truth in a way that makes them doubt it." Ghost Team didn't just run missions, we revolutionized how tactical deception could be implemented. Every operation was a testing ground for technologies most people think are still theoretical. Through her feeds, she watched the chaos unfold as their sensor equipment began displaying contradictory readings. Every attempt to isolate her real defenses from the decoys only generated more uncertainty. Signals appeared genuine by every verification, method they possessed, yet couldn't possibly all be real. Their most sophisticated analysis equipment was reporting defensive capabilities that, according to their intelligence, shouldn't exist outside of experimental military laboratories. "Multiple quantum signatures detected," their technical specialist reported, confusion evident in his voice. "Sir, these readings, they're showing technology that doesn't officially exist. Every time we adjust our scanning parameters, the signatures adapt. It's like the entire ranch is a living quantum computer." Viper's response was immediate but measured, showing the experience that had made him legendary in his own right. "Fall back to defensive positions, maintain unit cohesion. She's not just using military tech, she's got prototype systems even we don't have data on." His voice carried a new note of respect tinged with concern. Los Sangre's intelligence seriously underestimated what we're dealing with here. This isn't just a defended position, it's a testing ground for next-generation warfare technology. Emily initiated her next sequence of countermeasures, each one carefully designed to build upon the uncertainty she'd created. "You should understand something, Viper," she transmitted, her voice calm despite the escalating situation. "This ranch isn't just my home. It's my last mission. Every piece of classified technology I ever encountered, every tactical innovation I ever developed, it's all been integrated into these defenses. I've spent years preparing for exactly this kind of situation, using resources and capabilities that even my own government doesn't know I possess." The confrontation entered a critical phase as Viper's forces initiated their most sophisticated response yet. Emily tracked their movements through her command center's displays, noting how they'd adapted their tactics to counter her technological advantages. Instead of relying on advanced equipment that her defenses could compromise, they had shifted to old-school special forces techniques, methods that predated modern electronic warfare. "All units implement blackout protocols," Viper commanded, his voice carrying the authority of decades of special operations experience. Disable all electronic equipment except essential communications. Return to basic training principles. Sometimes the oldest methods are the most effective against advanced opposition. Emily watched with professional appreciation as his teams demonstrated why they were considered elite operators. They moved with practiced precision through her property's terrain, using natural cover and maintaining visual contact through hand signals. Their formation was perfect, a testament to countless hours of training and real-world experience. "Interesting choice," she transmitted on their command frequency, "negating your own technological advantages to avoid my countermeasures. I'd expect nothing less from someone with your reputation, Viper." Through her thermal imaging, she observed their new approach. They had split into smaller, more mobile units, each capable of operating independently while maintaining tactical coherence. It was a strategy she herself had developed during her Force Recon days. When facing a technologically superior opponent, sometimes the best response was to go back to basics. The baby shifted restlessly, responding to her heightened alertness. Emily adjusted her tactical vest, designed specifically for her pregnant condition, while initiating her own countermeasures. "Your dad would have appreciated this," she whispered to her unborn child. "He always said the best warriors are the ones who can adapt when their primary advantages are neutralized." "Target's defensive systems are sophisticated," one of Viper's team leaders reported, using minimalist communications to avoid detection. "But they're designed to counter modern threats. Our current approach is creating gaps in her coverage." Emily allowed herself a slight smile as she watched them advance. They were good, identifying and exploiting what appeared to be weaknesses in her defense network. But like everything else about her ranch, these apparent vulnerabilities had been carefully crafted to serve her larger strategy. "Shadow, execute pattern echo," she whispered into her command mic. The German shepherd moved silently through the darkness, his military training evident in every movement. He wasn't just a pet or even a guard dog. He was a combat-trained operator, in his own right, capable of executing complex tactical maneuvers independently. Viper's teams had advanced roughly 60 meters into her property when they encountered the first layer of her low-tech countermeasures. Hidden tripwires, carefully, tensioned to avoid detection even by trained operators, triggered a series of mechanical responses. No electronics, no signals to detect, just precisely engineered systems that functioned on purely physical principles. "Contact front!" The warning came too late as the ground beneath their feet suddenly shifted. Emily had spent months preparing these defenses, using her engineering background to create mechanisms that required no power sources. Terrain that had appeared solid became unstable, forcing Viper's teams to adjust their movements constantly. She anticipated this, Viper realized, his voice carrying grudging admiration. The electronic warfare capabilities were just the surface layer. She's got this entire property rigged with mechanical traps that don't show up on any scanners. Emily activated her property's irrigation systems, but not for their intended purpose. The water pressure had been modified to create specific patterns of mud and unstable ground, channeling Viper's forces into predetermined zones. Each patch of seemingly solid ground could become treacherous at her command, all without using any technology they could detect or counter. "You're forgetting something fundamental about Force Recon," she transmitted. "We specialized in operating when everything else failed. Every piece of technology, every advanced system on this ranch, they're all just backup for the basic principles of tactical warfare." Through her feeds, she watched their growing frustration as they encountered layer after layer of non-technological defenses. Every route they took to avoid her electronic countermeasures led them into carefully prepared killing zones covered by traditional defensive positions. "Full tactical withdrawal," Viper ordered, recognizing the trap they'd walked into. She's not just using the technology to defend her position, She's using it to hide the true nature of her defenses, regroup and reassess. Durita, the Texas Knight, had transformed into a masterclass in asymmetric warfare as both sides demonstrated why they were considered legends in their respective fields. Viper's forces had regrouped after encountering Emily's mechanical defenses, but, rather than retreating, they began implementing a strategy that demonstrated their commander's tactical genius. "All units, initiate dispersed infiltration pattern Sierra," Viper commanded. "She's expecting us to mass our forces. Time to show her why Los Sangre brought in specialists." His teams began splitting into smaller units, each moving independently, but coordinating their actions through subtle signals that even Emily's sophisticated surveillance had trouble detecting. Through her command center's displays, Emily watched their new approach with professional respect. They were using advanced dispersal tactics she recognized from classified counterinsurgency manuals, techniques specifically designed to overcome prepared defensive positions by attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. "Impressive adaptation," she transmitted on their frequency. "Using guerrilla warfare tactics against a fixed position. But you're forgetting something crucial about Force Recon's training philosophy." The baby kicked vigorously, and Emily patted her belly while activating a new series of defensive measures. "Easy there, little warrior," she whispered. "Your mom's about to demonstrate why ghost teams specialized in turning enemy tactics against them." Her ranch's defenses began shifting in response to their new approach. The irrigation systems she'd modified created patches of unstable ground in seemingly random patterns, but each was precisely calculated to disrupt their dispersed formation without revealing the broader defensive strategy. "Multiple teams reporting terrain instability," one of Viper's operators transmitted. "She's not just reacting to our movements, she's predicting them." Through her thermal imaging, Emily tracked their responses. Each team was professional, adapting quickly to the changing conditions, but she noted the subtle signs of growing uncertainty in their movements. They were starting to realize that every counter-tactic they employed had already been anticipated and prepared for. "You've got 24 operators on my property," Emily broadcast, her voice carrying the calm confidence that had made her legendary among Special Forces commanders. Each one highly trained, experienced in counterinsurgency operations. "But you're all thinking like soldiers. I'm thinking like a mother defending her child." Viper's response was immediate and demonstrated his own tactical brilliance. "All units, implement psychological countermeasures. She's not just defending her position, she's fighting for something more fundamental. Adjust your approach accordingly." Emily watched through her feeds as his teams began employing advanced psychological warfare techniques. They started creating deliberate patterns in their movements, designed to draw her attention in specific directions while masking their true objectives. "The thing about psychological warfare," she transmitted, activating another layer of her defense strategy, "is that it works both ways. Shadow, execute pattern Delta." Her German Shepherd moved through the darkness with silent efficiency, his military training evident in every movement. But he wasn't alone. Emily had prepared multiple autonomous defense systems that mimicked canine movement patterns, creating the impression of an entire pack of combat-trained dogs operating in coordinated patterns. "Contact multiple canine units," one of Viper's team leaders reported urgently. "They're using advanced pack tactics. These aren't just guard dogs, they're military-trained operators." Emily's next move demonstrated why she'd earned her reputation for tactical innovation. The ranch's defensive systems began operating in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully choreographed to create specific psychological effects. Each team encountered different challenges, making it impossible for them to establish a consistent picture of what they were facing. "You're implementing advanced pattern recognition countermeasures," Viper observed. his voice carrying professional respect, making it impossible for us to distinguish between real threats and distractions. But you can't maintain this level of complexity indefinitely, not in your condition. That's where you're wrong, Emily replied, initiating her next sequence of defensive measures. Everything you're seeing, everything you're experiencing, it's all designed to operate autonomously. I'm not just defending my ranch. I've turned it into a living defensive organism that adapts to threats automatically. Through her tactical displays, she watched as her integrated defense systems continued evolving in response to their movements. Each countermeasure was designed to feed into the next, creating a constantly shifting battlefield that denied them any stable position from which to mount an effective assault. The tactical situation reached a critical juncture as Viper implemented his most daring strategy yet. Emily watched through her command center as 3 Black Hawk helicopters appeared on her long-range sensors, approaching from different vectors. This wasn't just an escalation. It was a complete shift in the battlefield dynamics. Air assets entering operational range, Viper transmitted to his ground teams. Prepare for synchronized assault pattern Echo. Let's see how sophisticated her defenses are against aerial insertion. The helicopters moved with military precision, their pilots demonstrating the kind of expertise that only came from years of special operations experience. Emily's hand moved to her tactical console, while her other rested protectively over her unborn child. "They think air superiority changes everything," she whispered. "Time to show them why Ghost Team's reputation went beyond just ground operations." Through her thermal imaging, she tracked the helicopters' approach patterns. Their formation was perfect, designed to minimize exposure to conventional anti-air defenses while maximizing their ability to insert troops rapidly. But Emily had spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. "You're probably wondering why a pregnant widow would have anti-aircraft capabilities," she transmitted on their frequency. "That's the thing about Force Recon. We plan for every contingency, especially the ones our opponents think are impossible." The ranch's defensive systems shifted into their aerial denial configuration. Modified agricultural drones equipped with sophisticated electronic warfare packages activated in sequence. Each drone was designed to appear harmless while carrying capabilities that shouldn't exist outside of classified military programs. "Multiple electronic warfare signatures detected," one of the helicopter pilots reported urgently. "They're not just jamming, they're corrupting our flight control systems." Emily watched through her feeds as her countermeasures took effect. The drones weren't attacking the helicopters directly. Instead, they were creating electronic dead zones that made precise flight control increasingly difficult. Each attempt by the pilots to compensate only led them into new areas of electromagnetic interference. "Impressive system," Viper acknowledged, his voice carrying professional respect despite the situation. "Using non-lethal methods to deny us air superiority without risking civilian casualties. Your reputation for tactical innovation was well earned." But Viper hadn't earned his own reputation by giving up easily. The helicopters shifted formation, implementing countermeasures that demonstrated their pilots' exceptional skill. They began using the electronic interference patterns to mask their true insertion points, turning Emily's defenses into cover for their approach. "All ground teams, prepare for rapid deployment," Viper commanded. "She can't maintain electronic denial over her entire property. Find the gaps and exploit them." Emily's response demonstrated why she'd been considered one of the military's finest tactical commanders. The ranch's defensive grid suddenly shifted, creating corridors of apparently safe airspace. To most observers, it would appear her systems were failing under the strain of covering too much area. "Sir, we've got clear approaches opening up," one of the pilots reported. "Her defenses are breaking down. Multiple safe insertion points available." Through her thermal imaging, Emily watched them take the bait. The helicopters moved precisely into the position she'd predicted, each pilot believing they'd found a weakness in her coverage. What they couldn't know was that every apparent gap in her defenses had been carefully calculated to serve her larger strategy. "Shadow, initiate sequence, Charlie," she transmitted to her German shepherd. The dog moved silently into position, another piece in the complex tactical puzzle about to unfold. "You're making a classic tactical error," Emily broadcast as the helicopters began their final approach, assuming that because something appears vulnerable, it actually is. Force Recon's first rule of engagement: if a target looks exposed, it's probably a trap. The helicopters suddenly found themselves caught in a three-dimensional web of defensive measures. The safe corridors they'd identified transformed into kill zones as hidden defensive systems activated simultaneously. Each layer of Emily's defense had been designed not just to protect her property, but to funnel aerial threats into precisely prepared positions. "Multiple systems activating." The lead pilot's voice carried professional concern rather than panic. "She's got some kind of coordinated defense grid. Everything we thought was a gap is actually a targeting zone." Emily's next move demonstrated why she'd earned the call sign Ghost during her military career. The ranch's defensive systems began operating in perfect synchronization, each element working to deny the helicopters any safe approach while carefully avoiding actions that might endanger the aircraft themselves. "You brought military hardware to what you thought was a simple ranch operation," she transmitted. "I turned my entire property into an integrated defense system specifically designed to counter military-grade threats. The question is, how much are you willing to risk to find out what other surprises I've prepared?" The confrontation entered a new phase as Viper executed his most audacious strategy yet. While his helicopters maintained their complex dance with Emily's aerial defenses, creating an elaborate distraction, his ground forces began implementing an approach that demonstrated why he was considered a tactical genius. "All teams, initiate Operation Silverfish," Viper commanded. Through her security feeds, Emily watched as his operators began deploying specialized tunneling equipment, technology she recognized from classified military research programs. They weren't just trying to breach her defenses. They were attempting to go under them. "Interesting choice," Emily transmitted, her hands moving across her tactical console with practiced efficiency. "Using subterranean insertion techniques, you've obviously done your homework on Force Recon's traditional defensive weaknesses." The baby kicked vigorously, responding to her heightened alertness. Emily smiled grimly while activating previously hidden layers of her defense system. "Your timing needs work, though," she continued. "You're about to learn why Ghost Team's reputation went beyond just surface-level operations." Her underground sensor network came alive, revealing a complex web of detection systems that extended deep beneath the ranch's surface. Each vibration, each subtle change in the soil's electromagnetic signature painted a precise picture of their tunneling operations. "Multiple subsurface contacts," one of Viper's technical specialists reported urgently. "She's got some kind of advanced seismic detection grid. These readings, they're like nothing in our databases." Through her thermal imaging, Emily tracked their underground progress while implementing her countermeasures. The ranch's defensive systems had been designed with multiple layers, each one carefully crafted to address different types of threats. What appeared to be ordinary irrigation pipes began pumping specially formulated compounds into the soil, changing its structural properties in ways her opponents couldn't predict. "You should understand something about mothers protecting their children," Emily broadcast as she watched their tunneling operations encounter her first layer of subsurface defenses. "We don't just think about obvious threats, we prepare for everything, even the possibilities that seem impossible." Viper's response demonstrated his own tactical brilliance. "All teams, shift to pattern Omega." She's not just defending her surface position, she's turned the entire property into a three-dimensional battlefield. Adapt accordingly. His teams began implementing advanced countermeasures using technology that shouldn't have existed outside of military research laboratories. Each group moved with precise coordination, attempting to overcome her defenses through sheer technical sophistication. "Your determination is admirable," Emily transmitted, watching them deploy increasingly advanced equipment. "But you're still thinking like conventional operators. I've had years to prepare these defenses, and I did it with the mindset of a mother who would do anything to protect her child." The ranch's defensive grid shifted again, revealing new capabilities that challenged their tactical assumptions. What they had thought was simply fortified soil became an actively responsive defense system, using principles of geological engineering that Emily had developed during her classified operations. "Sir, we're losing contact with Team 3, 1. Of Viper's operators reported. The ground. It's not behaving like it should. Every time we adjust our approach, the soil conditions change to counter us." Emily's next move demonstrated why she'd earned her reputation for tactical innovation. The ranch's subsurface defense systems began operating in patterns that seemed to defy conventional physics, using principles she'd developed while working on classified projects that even her own government hadn't fully understood. "Remarkable engineering," Viper acknowledged, his voice carrying genuine respect. "You've turned the very earth against us, but you can't maintain this level of defense indefinitely, not in your condition." "That's where you're wrong," Emily replied, initiating her next sequence of countermeasures. "Everything you're seeing, everything you're experiencing, it's all powered by sustainable systems I designed specifically for long-term operation. This isn't just a defensive position, it's a living fortress designed to protect my child." Through her tactical displays, she watched as her integrated defense systems continued evolving in response to their attempts at subterranean infiltration. Each countermeasure was designed to feed into the next, creating a constantly shifting battlefield that denied them any stable position from which to mount an effective assault. "Sir, Team 4 is reporting critical equipment failure," another operator called out. "The soil composition keeps changing. It's like fighting against a living organism." The tactical situation evolved dramatically as Emily detected a new threat emerging. Through her command center's displays, she watched Viper's forces implement a strategy that demonstrated why he was considered one of the most innovative tactical commanders in special operations history. "All units, execute Protocol Chimera," Viper commanded. His teams began deploying what appeared to be standard smoke grenades, but Emily's sensors detected something far more sophisticated. The particles being released weren't just smoke. They were advanced nanoscale processors, designed to interface with and potentially override electronic systems. "Smart dust deployment," Emily transmitted, her voice carrying professional recognition. "Military prototype technology, supposedly still in development. You've been holding back your best capabilities." The baby kicked vigorously, as if sensing the escalating situation. Emily adjusted her tactical vest while initiating emergency countermeasures. "Your dad would have appreciated this level of innovation," she whispered to her unborn child. "But he also taught me never to show all your cards until the perfect moment." Through her thermal imaging, she watched the smart dust particles spreading across her property, attempting to create a networked web that could penetrate her defenses. The technology was brilliant. Each microscopic processor could potentially bypass traditional security systems by creating its own micro-network. "Multiple system breaches detected," her security AI reported. "Smart dust particles attempting to interface with defensive grid control nodes." Viper's voice carried calculated confidence. Impressive defenses, Captain, but even the most sophisticated system has vulnerabilities. These particles will find every electronic weakness in your perimeter. Emily's response was to activate defensive measures that even her former military commanders didn't know existed. The ranch's outer defense layer suddenly pulsed with what appeared to be a localized electromagnetic field, but it was something far more advanced. "Quantum field disruption detected," one of Viper's technical specialists called out urgently. "She's using some kind of experimental countermeasure technology. The smart dust network is destabilizing." Through her feeds, Emily watched her quantum defense grid neutralize their nanoscale attack. Each particle that attempted to penetrate her systems found itself caught in microscopic quantum entanglement fields, effectively neutralizing their processing capabilities without destroying them. "You're not the only one with access to prototype technology," Emily broadcast. "The difference is, I've had years to perfect my implementations. Everything you're seeing was designed with one purpose: protecting my family." But Viper hadn't earned his reputation by giving up easily. His teams began implementing a multi-layered assault that demonstrated their exceptional training. While the smart dust attack continued, drawing her defensive responses, other teams began setting up what appeared to be sonic resonance generators. "Phase 2 initiation," Viper commanded. The devices activated simultaneously, creating complex wave patterns designed to interfere with electronic systems at their most fundamental level. It was a brilliant strategy, using physical forces to overcome technological defenses. Emily's next move revealed why she'd been considered Force Recon's most innovative commander. "Shadow, execute Protocol Omega," she transmitted to her German shepherd. The dog moved with military precision to specific points around the property, each position carefully calculated. "What's the matter, Captain?" Viper transmitted as his sonic attack intensified. "Found a frequency your defenses can't counter." "Actually," Emily replied, triggering her next sequence of countermeasures, "I was waiting for you to commit your resources to this attack vector." The ranch's defensive grid suddenly shifted in ways that defied tactical logic. What had appeared to be vulnerabilities in her electronic defenses revealed themselves as carefully crafted traps. "Multiple harmonic anomalies detected," his technical team reported. "The sonic waves. They're being reflected and amplified. She's using our own attack frequencies against us." The true sophistication of Emily's defense system became apparent as her countermeasures took effect. Each sonic generator found its output caught in precisely calculated reflection patterns, creating interference waves that disrupted their own equipment instead of her defenses. "You thought you were exploiting weaknesses in my system," Emily transmitted, watching their realization through her feeds. "But every vulnerability you found was deliberately engineered to draw you into specific response patterns. Force Recon's primary tactical principle: make your enemy's strength become their weakness." The tactical situation reached a crucial turning point as Viper unveiled his most sophisticated strategy yet. Through her command center's displays, Emily watched as his teams began deploying what appeared to be standard communications equipment. But her advanced sensors detected something far more insidious. "All units, initiate Protocol Phoenix," Viper commanded. The seemingly innocent communication devices suddenly activated in a synchronized pattern, creating an invisible web of quantum-encrypted signals. "Let's see how your defenses handle a system they can't detect or predict." Emily's hand moved instinctively to her belly as the baby kicked, somehow sensing the mounting tension. "They think they've found our weakness," she whispered. "Time to show them why Ghost Team specialized in turning scientific impossibilities into tactical advantages." Through her thermal imaging, she watched as Viper's quantum network expanded across her property. The technology was revolutionary. each node operating on principles that should have made them invisible to conventional detection methods. Their signal patterns changed faster than any normal system could track, making them theoretically impossible to counter. No electromagnetic signatures detected, her AI reported. Standard detection protocols ineffective against quantum state communications. Viper's voice carried calculated confidence. Impressive defenses, Captain, but even the most sophisticated system has fundamental limits. You can't defend against what you can't detect. Emily's response demonstrated why she'd earned her reputation for tactical innovation. The ranch's defensive grid suddenly pulsed with energy patterns that shouldn't have been possible according to known physics. Her own quantum detection system, developed during classified operations that even her government hadn't fully understood, came online. Multiple quantum entanglement signatures identified, she transmitted, watching their reaction through her feeds. Did you really think I wouldn't have countermeasures for quantum-based attacks? Ghost Team wrote the book on countering impossible technologies, but Viper hadn't earned his reputation by relying on single strategies. His teams began implementing a multi-layered assault that showcased their exceptional training. While the quantum network continued its attempt to penetrate her defenses, other units deployed what appeared to be simple signal jammers. Phase 2 activation, Viper ordered. The jammers activated simultaneously, but instead of trying to block communications, they began emitting precisely calibrated frequencies designed to create quantum decoherence, theoretically disrupting any quantum-based defense systems. Emily's next move revealed why she'd been considered Force Recon's most innovative commander. Shadow, execute Protocol Omega, she transmitted to her German shepherd. The dog moved with military precision to specific points around the property, each position carefully calculated to serve her larger strategy. Decoherence field expanding, one of Viper's technical specialists reported confidently. Her quantum defenses should be failing. Wait, something's wrong. The field patterns aren't behaving according to quantum mechanics principles. Through her displays, Emily watched as her countermeasures took effect. Each decoherence generator found its output caught in what appeared to be localized reality. Distortion fields, technology that shouldn't have existed outside theoretical physics laboratories. You assumed I was using standard quantum mechanics, Emily broadcast, watching their growing realization. But Ghost Team's final classified project involved something far more advanced. We learned how to manipulate quantum fields in ways that defied conventional physics. The true sophistication of her defense system became apparent as her countermeasures activated fully. The ranch's entire defensive grid shifted into what appeared to be multiple quantum states simultaneously, making it impossible for their attacks to target any single vulnerability. Sir, we're losing control of the quantum network. Another specialist reported urgently. Her systems aren't just countering our attack, they're somehow using our own quantum entanglement against us. Viper's response demonstrated his own tactical brilliance. All units shift to contingency pattern Delta. She's not just defending, she's created some kind of quantum hybrid defense system we've never encountered before. Emily's next sequence of countermeasures demonstrated why she'd earned the call sign Ghost. The ranch's defensive systems began operating on principles that seemed to violate the laws of physics themselves, creating effects that even her own former military commanders had deemed impossible. You should understand something fundamental, she transmitted, watching their growing uncertainty. When I learned I was pregnant, I didn't just prepare defenses, I revolutionized how quantum mechanics could be applied to tactical situations. Everything you're seeing was developed by a mother who understood that conventional physics wouldn't be enough to protect her child. The confrontation reached a critical juncture as Viper implemented his most daring strategy yet. Through her, Command Center's displays, Emily watched his forces begin deploying what appeared to be standard perimeter sensors around her property. But her advanced detection systems revealed something far more sophisticated. All units, initiate protocol. Hydra, Viper commanded. The seemingly innocent sensors suddenly activated, creating an invisible network of artificial intelligence nodes. Let's see how your defenses handle an opponent that can think and adapt faster than any human. Emily's hand moved to her tactical console, while her other rested protectively over her unborn child. They think AI is the answer, she whispered. Time to show them why human intuition, especially a mother's instinct, can't be replicated by machines. Through her thermal imaging, she watched as Viper's AI network established itself across her property. The technology was cutting edge. Each node capable of analyzing and adapting to tactical situations in microseconds, learning and evolving its strategies faster than any conventional defense could counter. Multiple AI cores detected, her security system reported. They're establishing a distributed neural network, attempting to predict and counter our defense patterns. Viper's voice carried measured confidence. Impressive systems, Captain. But even the most sophisticated human-controlled defense has limits. Our AI can analyze and adapt to patterns faster than any operator can respond. Emily's response demonstrated why she'd been considered Force Recon's most innovative tactician. The ranch's defensive grid suddenly shifted into patterns that defied conventional tactical analysis. Her own counter-AI system, developed during classified operations that had pushed the boundaries of human-machine integration, came online. "You're assuming I'm fighting your AI directly," she transmitted, watching their reaction through her feeds. Ghost Team's final project wasn't about building better artificial intelligence. It was about creating systems that could harness human intuition and experience in ways machines could never predict. The baby kicked vigorously, and Emily smiled. Grimly, even your child knows, she broadcast. There are some things technology can't replicate. A mother's instinct to protect, enhanced by military experience and cutting-edge technology, that's something your AI can't quantify. But Viper hadn't become legendary by relying on single strategies. His teams began implementing a multi-layered assault that demonstrated their exceptional adaptability. While the AI network continued its attempts to predict and counter her defenses, other units deployed what appeared to be quantum computing modules. Phase 2 initiation, Viper ordered. The modules activated simultaneously, linking with the AI network to create a hybrid system that could theoretically process tactical options faster than human consciousness could perceive them. Emily's next move revealed why she'd earned her reputation for tactical brilliance. "Shadow, execute Protocol Lambda," she transmitted to her German shepherd. The dog moved with precision to specific points around the property, each position serving a purpose in her larger strategy. "The hybrid network is fully operational," one of Viper's technical specialists reported. "AI is running tactical simulations at quantum speeds." Wait, something's wrong. The defense patterns, they're not following any logical progression. Through her displays, Emily watched as her countermeasures took effect. Each AI node, attempting to predict her defense patterns, found itself analyzing data that seemed to contradict tactical logic while still being devastatingly effective. "You tried to quantify combat into pure mathematics," Emily broadcast, watching their growing realization. But Ghost Team understood something fundamental. Real tactical innovation comes from combining human intuition with technology, not replacing it. The true sophistication of her defense system became apparent as her countermeasures fully activated. The ranch's defensive grid began operating on principles that combined military experience, maternal instinct, and advanced technology in ways that no AI could effectively predict or counter. "Sir," The AI network is failing, another specialist reported urgently. It can't establish reliable pattern recognition. Every time it adapts to one strategy, she implements something that seems to violate its basic tactical programming. The confrontation entered its most critical phase as Viper unveiled a strategy that demonstrated why he was considered a tactical revolutionary. Through her command center's displays, Emily watched as his forces began implementing what appeared to be a complete withdrawal, but her years of experience told her something more sophisticated was unfolding. "All units, execute Protocol Chimera Prime," Viper commanded. His teams began deploying what looked like standard reconnaissance drones, but Emily's advanced sensors detected something unprecedented. Each drone carried experimental metamaterial in technology, devices capable of bending light and other electromagnetic waves around them. "They're not retreating," Emily whispered, her hand moving protectively over her belly. "They're transitioning to something we've never encountered before." The baby kicked, as if acknowledging the escalating situation. Through her thermal imaging, she watched as Viper's forces seemed to fade from conventional detection. The metamaterial technology was revolutionary, creating zones of altered physical reality where normal laws of reflection and detection didn't apply. It wasn't just invisibility, it was selective existence in the electromagnetic spectrum. "Multiple reality distortion. Fields detected," her security system reported. "Standard detection protocols becoming unreliable. They're creating spaces where our sensors say nothing exists, but logic says something must be there." Viper's voice carried calculated precision. "Impressive defenses, Captain, but even the most sophisticated system relies on being able to detect what it's defending against. Welcome to the future of warfare, where the enemy isn't just invisible, but technically doesn't exist in detectable space." Emily's response demonstrated why she'd earned her reputation as Force Recon's most innovative commander. The ranch's defensive grid suddenly shifted into configurations that seemed to defy conventional physics. Her own countermeasure systems, developed during classified operations that had explored the boundaries of known science, activated in sequence. "Shadow, initiate protocol Omega Prime," she transmitted. Her German Shepherd moved with military precision to specific points around the property, each position carefully calculated to serve her evolving strategy. But this time, Shadow wasn't just acting as a tactical element, he was becoming part of something far more sophisticated. "The thing about dogs," Emily broadcast on their frequency, "is that they don't rely solely on electromagnetic detection. They experience reality in ways our technology can't replicate. And when you combine that natural capability with military training and advanced technology." Through her feeds, she watched as Shadow began moving in patterns that precisely intersected with Viper's metamaterial fields. The dog wasn't just detecting their hidden forces, he was actively mapping spaces where reality itself seemed to be selectively altered. "Sir, we're losing coherence in the metamaterial fields," one of Viper's technical specialists reported urgently. "She's not just detecting our presence, she's somehow using our own technology to map our positions." Emily's next move revealed why she'd been considered Force Recon's most innovative tactician. The ranch's defensive systems began operating in harmony with Shadow's movements, creating a hybrid detection grid that combined animal instinct, military technology, and something entirely new. "You assumed that by transcending normal physical detection you'd be unbeatable," Emily transmitted, watching their growing realization. But Ghost Team's final project wasn't about building better detection systems. It was about understanding that the most effective defense combines multiple levels of reality perception. The true sophistication of her counter-strategy became apparent as her integrated defense system fully activated. Each of Shadow's movements triggered precisely calculated responses from her technological defenses, creating a synergy between animal instinct and advanced science that made hiding in altered space impossible. Loss of tactical advantage, another specialist called out. Her defense grid isn't just detecting us, it's somehow using our own metamaterial fields to enhance its capabilities. Viper's response demonstrated his own tactical brilliance. All units, shift to contingency pattern echo. She's not just defending against our technology, she's created some kind of hybrid system that bridges the gap between natural sensing and advanced physics. The most effective innovations, Emily, broadcast, don't come from transcending nature. They come from learning to work in harmony with it. Every defense on this ranch was designed with that principle in mind. The tactical situation reached its most intense phase as Viper initiated what appeared to be his final strategy. Through her command center's displays, Emily watched his forces implementing a coordinated assault that combined every advanced technology they'd deployed so far, but with a crucial difference that demonstrated true tactical brilliance. All units, execute Protocol Omega Strike, Viper commanded. His teams began synchronizing their various systems, the quantum network, AI cores, metamaterial fields and sonic disruptors, into a single integrated assault platform. Time to show why Los Sangre invested in military-grade experimental technology. Emily's hand rested momentarily on her belly as she felt the baby kick. They think combining everything makes them stronger, she whispered. Time to show them why Ghost teams specialized in turning sophisticated attacks against themselves. Through her thermal imaging, she watched as Viper's integrated assault system came online. The synergy between their various technologies created something unprecedented, a tactical network that could adapt and evolve in real time while remaining partially phased out of normal reality. Multiple synchronized attack vectors detected, her security system reported. They're creating a cascading assault pattern that shifts faster than individual countermeasures can respond. Viper's voice carried the confidence of someone who believed they'd found the perfect solution. Impressive. Defensive depth, Captain, but even the most sophisticated layered defense has a breaking point. Each system might be formidable alone, but now you have to counter everything simultaneously. Emily's response revealed why she'd been considered Force Recon's most innovative strategist. The ranch's defensive grid suddenly shifted into what appeared to be a state of controlled chaos. Her own integrated defense system, developed through years of combining military experience with maternal intuition, activated its final protocols. Shadow, execute Symphony Protocol, she transmitted. Her German Shepherd moved with precise purpose to new positions around the property, each location carefully chosen to serve her masterpiece of tactical engineering. Through her feeds, she watched as her counter-strategy unfolded. Instead of trying to defend against each of their technologies separately, her systems began creating harmonic resonances between them, turning their own synchronization against them. Critical feedback detected in quantum network, one of Viper's specialists reported urgently. The AI cores are receiving conflicting data streams from the metamaterial fields. It's like she's using our own integration against us. Emily's next move demonstrated why she'd earned her legendary status. The ranch's defensive grid wasn't just countering their attack, it was actively using their own technological synchronization to enhance its capabilities. You assumed that combining all your advanced systems would make them stronger, she transmitted, watching their growing realization. But Ghost Team's final innovation wasn't about building better individual systems. It was about understanding how to create harmony between seemingly incompatible forces. The true sophistication of her defense system became apparent as her countermeasures fully activated. Each of their synchronized attacks found itself caught in precisely calculated feedback loops, creating a cascade of technological interference that grew stronger the more they tried to coordinate their assault. "Sir, we're losing control of the integrated network," another specialist called out. "The more we try to synchronize our systems, the more she uses that synchronization to amplify her countermeasures." Viper's response showed his own tactical brilliance. "All units attempt to disengage synchronized protocols," he ordered, recognizing the trap too late. But Emily's system had been designed for exactly this scenario. "The thing about harmony," she broadcast, "is that once it's established, trying to break it can be more dangerous than maintaining it. Every mother understands this, the delicate balance between strength and adaptability, between protection and response." Through her tactical displays, she watched as their attempts to disengage their synchronized systems only created more complex patterns of interference. Each technology, trying to operate independently, found itself still caught in the harmonic web she'd created. The tactical situation reached its defining moment as Viper revealed his true masterstroke. Through her command center's displays, Emily watched as his forces began implementing a strategy that showed why he was considered a grandmaster of psychological warfare. "All units, execute Protocol Thanatos," Viper commanded. His teams suddenly shifted their tactics completely, powering down their advanced technology and switching to pure human-driven operations. Sometimes the most sophisticated response is to embrace simplicity. Emily's hand moved protectively over her belly as she analyzed this unexpected development. "They're abandoning their technological advantage," she whispered, "which means they've figured out something we haven't anticipated." Through her thermal imaging, she watched as Viper's forces reorganized into traditional small unit tactics. Each team moved with the kind of precision that only came from years of actual combat experience, demonstrating why they were considered elite operators, even without advanced technology. "All electronic signatures from hostile forces have ceased," her security system reported. "They appear to be operating on pure manual protocols." Viper's voice carried the calm confidence of someone who had accepted the true nature of the conflict. "You've proven that technology isn't the answer, Captain. Your defensive systems can counter any advanced attack we deploy. So let's strip this down to its essence. Operator against operator, skill against skill." Emily's response demonstrated why she'd earned her reputation for tactical adaptation. The ranch's defensive grid shifted to accommodate this new threat, but she recognized the psychological element of Viper's strategy. He wasn't just changing tactics, he was attempting to force her into a type of conflict that her pregnancy might disadvantage her in. "Shadow, initiate primal protocol," she transmitted. Her German shepherd moved with deadly purpose, understanding that this phase of the battle would rely more on trained instinct than technological advantage. Through her feeds, she watched as the conflict transformed into something more fundamental. Each of Viper's teams began implementing advanced guerrilla warfare tactics, using the very terrain modifications her defenses had created as cover for their approach. "They're exploiting our own defensive alterations," she noted, recognizing the brilliance of their strategy. The very changes she'd made to the ranch to counter their technology were now providing them with perfect infiltration routes. "You've created an impressive fortress," Viper transmitted, his teams moving with increasing confidence. "But in doing so, you've also created a perfect urban warfare environment. Every defensive position becomes potential cover for a determined attacker." Emily's next move revealed why she'd been considered Force Recon's most adaptable commander. Instead of trying to counter their new tactics directly, she began implementing what appeared to be random changes to the ranch's terrain, but each modification was precisely calculated. "The thing about fortresses," she broadcast, watching their reaction, "is that they're only predictable if they remain static. Ghost teams specialized in dynamic defense, constantly evolving, never presenting the same battlefield twice." The true sophistication of her strategy became apparent as her defense system adapted. The ranch's entire layout began shifting subtly but significantly, using hydraulic systems and mechanical alterations to change the tactical landscape in real time. "Sir, the terrain is actively changing," one of Viper's team leaders reported urgently. "Every time we establish a covered position, the surrounding environment shifts to compromise it." "You assumed that by abandoning technology you'd force me into a conventional conflict," Emily transmitted, her voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who had anticipated this possibility. "But every aspect of this ranch's defense was designed with multiple layers: technological, tactical, and physical." Through her tactical displays, she watched as their carefully planned infiltration routes became increasingly treacherous. Each team found themselves having to constantly reassess and adapt as the very ground they were using for cover shifted beneath them. The confrontation entered its most intense phase as Emily seized the initiative, implementing a strategy that demonstrated why she had been Force Recon's most unpredictable commander. Through her tactical displays, she watched Viper's forces struggling to adapt to her constantly shifting terrain, and decided it was time to show them the true meaning of tactical innovation. "Shadow, execute Protocol Genesis," she commanded. Her German Shepherd moved with deadly precision to predetermined positions, but this time there was something different about his movements. He wasn't just responding to commands, he was initiating a sequence that would transform the entire battlefield. "They've adapted to our defensive posture," Emily whispered, feeling her child kick as if in agreement. Time to show them why Ghost Team was known for turning defense into offense at the most unexpected moments. Through her thermal imaging, she watched as Viper's teams continued their attempted infiltration, still confident that their return to basic tactics had given them an advantage. What they couldn't know was that every step they took was part of a larger trap, one that had been waiting for precisely this moment. "Multiple teams reporting successful advancement," one of Viper's operators transmitted. "The terrain changes are challenging but manageable. We're making progress." Emily's response demonstrated why she'd earned her legendary status. The ranch's defensive system suddenly shifted from reactive to proactive mode. Each terrain modification wasn't just changing the battlefield, it was systematically isolating and separating Viper's teams from each other. "The thing about guerrilla tactics," she broadcast on their frequency, "is that they only work when your units can maintain coordination. Ghost Teams specialized in turning small unit warfare against itself." Through her feeds, she watched as her counter-strategy unfolded. The very cover Viper's teams had been using began working against them, as carefully timed terrain changes cut off their retreat routes and communication lines. "Sir, we're being compartmentalized," a team leader reported urgently. "Every time we try to maintain unit cohesion, the terrain shifts to isolate us. It's like she's herding us." Viper recognized the trap too late. "All units, fall back to secondary positions immediately," he ordered, but Emily's system was already one step ahead. "You assumed that by abandoning technology, you'd simplify the battlefield," she transmitted, watching their growing realization. "But every defensive measure I created was designed with multiple purposes. What looks like protection can become containment with just a slight shift in strategy." The ranch's transformation became complete as her offensive systems activated. Hidden panels in the walls revealed non-lethal countermeasures. Advanced sonic disruptors and electromagnetic pulse generators specifically calibrated to incapacitate without causing permanent harm. "Team 3 is down," another operator called out. "Some kind of localized EMP, but more sophisticated than anything we've encountered. We can't even retreat without exposing ourselves to multiple overlapping fields of effect." Emily's next move showed why she'd been considered Force Recon's most innovative strategist. Instead of trying to capture or eliminate Viper's forces, she began systematically demonstrating how completely she controlled the battlefield. "This is a courtesy notification," she broadcast. "In 30 seconds, I'm going to activate a series of non-lethal defensive measures in Sector 4. Anyone still in that area will experience extreme disorientation. This isn't a threat. It's a demonstration of what I could have been doing since you arrived." True to her word, the specified sector was flooded with sophisticated disorientation technology that sent 3 more of Viper's teams staggering for cover that no longer existed. "You brought Los Sangre's best operators," Emily continued, her voice carrying absolute control. "You deployed experimental technology, tried psychological warfare, and even reverted to pure tactical operations. But you never understood what you were really fighting against." Through her tactical displays, she watched as the reality of their situation finally dawned on them. Every move they'd made, every strategy they'd attempted, had only served to position them exactly where she wanted them. Through her command center's displays, Emily watched as Viper's remaining forces regrouped for what they all knew would be their final attempt. The Texas dawn was approaching, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, but the real illumination was happening in the minds of Los Sangre's elite operators as they finally understood the true nature of their opponent. "Your reputation in Force Recon wasn't just about tactical brilliance," Viper transmitted, his voice carrying a mix of professional respect and dawning comprehension. "It was about understanding that the most effective defense comes from something deeper than training or technology." Emily's hand rested on her belly, feeling her child move as if in agreement. "The strongest protection," she replied, "comes from having something worth protecting. Everything you've encountered tonight, every defense, every countermeasure, every seemingly impossible capability, was developed by a mother preparing to defend her child." Through her thermal imaging, she watched as Viper's teams began implementing what appeared to be a strategic withdrawal. But their movement patterns suggested something more complex was unfolding. These weren't men simply retreating. They were professionals who had learned a profound lesson about underestimating their opponents. "Los Sangre won't accept failure," Viper transmitted, his teams maintaining perfect tactical discipline even in withdrawal. "They'll send others, different approaches, different tactics." "Let them come," Emily responded, activating her final sequence of defensive measures. The ranch's systems began shifting into their standby configuration, but with subtle modifications that would make future attackers face entirely different challenges. Every mother knows that protecting your child isn't about winning one battle. It's about being prepared for every threat, every time. Shadow moved silently to her side as Emily stood, her tactical vest fitting perfectly over her pregnant form. Through her feeds, she could see Viper's forces loading their wounded into vehicles, their movements showing the kind of respect that only comes from professionals who have encountered something that changed their fundamental understanding of warfare. "You should know," Emily broadcast, "that everything you've encountered tonight was just the first layer of defense. Every future attempt will face new challenges, new capabilities. This ranch isn't just protected by technology or tactics. It's defended by a mother's determination to ensure her child grows up safe." The baby kicked vigorously, and Emily smiled. Even her unborn child seemed to understand that this night had been about more than just defending territory. It had been about demonstrating that true strength comes from the combination of capability and purpose, of skill and motivation. "Your child," Viper transmitted, his voice carrying genuine admiration, "will grow up knowing something profound about their mother's strength, not just as a warrior, but as someone who understood that the most powerful defense comes from love." Through her tactical displays, Emily watched as the last of their vehicles began withdrawing. But this wasn't just a cartel force in retreat. It was a group of professional operators who had learned something fundamental about the nature of true strength. "Tell Los Sangre something for me," Emily broadcast. "Tell them that this ranch isn't defended by guns or technology or tactical brilliance. It's protected by something far more formidable. A mother who will never stop innovating, never stop preparing, never stop defending her child." The morning sun finally crested the horizon as the last vehicle disappeared from her senses. Emily moved through her command center, systematically checking systems and implementing new defensive configurations. Each modification was already incorporating lessons from the night's engagement, ensuring that any future attackers would face fresh challenges. "Remarkable performance," Blade's voice came through her secure channel. Her old team was still hours out, but they had monitored everything through satellite feeds. "Though I suspect this was about more than just tactical victory." "It was about sending a message," Emily replied, watching Shadow patrol their perimeter with renewed vigilance. "Not just to Los Sangre, but to anyone who thinks that pregnancy makes a woman vulnerable. Sometimes what appears to be a weakness is actually the source of our greatest strength." She moved to her porch. The morning air crisp and clean after the night's events. Her hand rested protectively over her belly as she surveyed her property. The ranch showed no obvious signs of the sophisticated battle that had taken place, but it had been transformed nonetheless, not by damage or destruction, but by becoming a symbol of something profound about the nature of true strength. "Your daddy would be proud," she whispered to her unborn child, "not just of how we defended his dream, but of what we proved about the power of being underestimated. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in defeating your enemy. It's in showing them why they should never have thought you were vulnerable in the first place." The Texas sun illuminated a ranch that appeared unchanged to casual observers. But those who had faced its defenses would never forget the lesson they had learned about the true nature of strength. It wasn't just about technology or tactics or training. It was about having something worth fighting for and the determination to ensure its protection. Emily Reeves stood on her porch, a pregnant widow who had just defeated one of the world's most sophisticated cartel forces. But her true victory wasn't in the battle itself. It was in demonstrating that the most formidable defender isn't always the one who appears strongest. Sometimes it's the one whose strength comes from something deeper than mere capability. The future would bring new challenges, new threats, new attempts to take what she protected. But Emily smiled, feeling her child move within her, knowing that each challenge would only make them stronger. Because the greatest power doesn't come from weapons or technology or tactical brilliance. It comes from having something worth protecting and the unwavering determination to ensure its safety. That was the real lesson of this night, one that would echo through cartel ranks and beyond, reminding everyone that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one you've already dismissed as harmless. 3 weeks after the confrontation at Double R Ranch, Emily Reeves sat in her command center reviewing intelligence reports that demonstrated how profoundly one night's events could reshape an entire criminal landscape. Her tactical displays showed a complete transformation of cartel operations along the Texas border, but not in the way anyone might have expected. Interesting pattern developing. Blade's voice came through her secure channel. Her former teammate had transitioned from emergency backup to strategic advisor, helping her understand the broader implications of her victory. Los Sangre isn't just withdrawing from the region, they're actively preventing other cartels from moving in. Emily studied the data while adjusting her tactical vest, now modified for her final month of pregnancy. Through her feeds, she watched satellite imagery showing cartel convoys actively turning away from approaches to her region, deliberately choosing longer routes that avoided any proximity to her property. "They're not just respecting our territory," she observed, noting the sophisticated pattern emerging. "They're creating a buffer zone. The question is why?" Her answer came in the form of an encrypted transmission from an unexpected source. Viper's voice carried none of its previous antagonism, replaced instead by professional respect and something that sounded almost like concern. "Captain Reeves," he transmitted on a quantum-encrypted channel that shouldn't have existed outside military networks. A courtesy notification. Los Sangre's leadership made an interesting decision after reviewing our encounter. They've designated your entire region as what they call Zona Phantasma, ghost territory, not because they fear your defensive capabilities, though those are formidable, but because you showed them something they'd never encountered before. Emily's hand moved instinctively to her belly as the baby kicked. "And what was that?" "Purpose," Viper replied simply. "In our world, most fights are about profit, territory, or power. You showed them something different. A mother's absolute commitment to protecting her child. It changed how they view the entire concept of territorial expansion." Through her tactical displays, Emily watched as her regional surveillance network tracked multiple cartel operations, actively redirecting away from her zone of influence. But it wasn't just fear driving their decisions. There was something more sophisticated at work. "Your victory that night," Viper continued, "forced them to reevaluate their basic operational assumptions. They realized that all their resources, their advanced technology, their professional operators, none of it could match the innovative capability of someone fighting for something more fundamental than profit." Sarah Chen's truck appeared on Emily's security feeds, approaching the ranch with news that would confirm the broader implications of her stand against Los Sangre. Emily moved to her porch, maintaining her role as a simple rancher, while her sophisticated command center continued, monitoring the tactical situation. "Emily!" Sarah called out, excitement evident in her voice as she climbed from her truck. "You need to hear what's happening in town. The Martinez family, they're back, and they're not the only ones. Families that left because of cartel pressure are returning. But here's the strange part. No one's bothering them. It's like the entire criminal world suddenly decided our valley is off limits." Emily allowed herself a small smile, understanding the deeper significance. Her defense of the Double R Ranch hadn't just protected her property. It had created a ripple effect that was transforming the entire region's security dynamics. "That's not all," Sarah continued, her eyes bright with possibility. "Remember that agricultural development project the county had to abandon because of cartel interference? It's back on. The commissioner says banks are suddenly willing to invest, like they've received some kind of guarantee that the region is stable." Through her concealed earpiece, Emily heard Blade's thoughtful analysis. "They're not just respecting your strength, they're leveraging it. Los Sangre figured out that having a stable, protected region actually benefits their broader operations. Less law enforcement attention, better cover for their other routes. They're turning their defeat into a strategic advantage." But Emily understood something deeper was occurring. Her tactical displays showed subtle changes in regional patrol patterns, both from law enforcement and cartel surveillance. The criminal organizations weren't just avoiding her territory, They were actively helping maintain its stability, recognizing that the presence of a formidable guardian actually served their larger interests. "Your child," Viper transmitted, his voice carrying unexpected wisdom, "will grow up in a region that's protected not just by your defensive capabilities, but by something more powerful: the reputation you've established. Every cartel operator from here to Colombia now tells stories about the pregnant widow who turned her ranch into something beyond their ability to overcome." Emily moved through her property, noting how the morning sun illuminated land that appeared peaceful and ordinary to casual observers. But beneath that tranquil surface lay innovations in defensive technology and tactical thinking that had fundamentally changed how criminal organizations viewed the entire concept of territorial expansion. "The most powerful defense," she whispered to her unborn child, "isn't in making people fear your strength, it's in making them respect your purpose. Your dad understood that. It's why he chose this land, why he dreamed of raising a family here. We didn't just protect his dream, we transformed it into something that protects others." The implications continued expanding as Emily received reports from her sophisticated intelligence network. Other regions were studying her example, not to replicate her defensive technology, but to understand how purpose and innovation could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. "You've started something remarkable," Blade observed, "not just in tactical innovation, but in demonstrating that true security comes from having something worth protecting and the commitment to ensure its safety no matter the odds." The Texas sun illuminated a landscape that had been transformed not by violence or force, but by the power of showing the world that sometimes the most formidable strength comes from what others perceive as vulnerability. Emily Reeves stood on her porch, a pregnant widow who had done more than just defend her home. She had shown that true innovation comes from the determination to protect what matters most. Part 21. 2 months after the confrontation that transformed the Texas borderlands, Emily Reeves stood in her ranch house's nursery, her newborn daughter sleeping peacefully in a custom-designed crib that embodied the same principles of protection and innovation that had defended their home. The morning sun illuminated a room that appeared ordinary to casual observers, but like everything else at the Double R Ranch, contained layers of sophisticated security integrated so seamlessly they were virtually invisible. "She has your determination," Sarah Chen observed from the doorway, her voice soft but carrying a deeper understanding of how profoundly one woman's stand had changed their entire region. "Even the way she grips her blanket shows that same quiet strength." Emily smiled, watching her daughter, while her tactical displays provided constant updates on the transformed security situation throughout their valley. The changes went far beyond simple territorial protection. They represented a fundamental shift in how strength and vulnerability were perceived along the entire border. "The latest intelligence assessment came in," Blade's voice transmitted through her concealed earpiece. 3 different cartels tried establishing new routes this month. All of them deliberately plotted courses that maintained a 100-mile buffer from your region. But here's the interesting part. They're not just avoiding us out of fear. They're actively participating in maintaining the stability of what they're calling the Ghost's Sanctuary. Through her sophisticated surveillance network, Emily tracked the subtle but profound changes occurring across the borderlands. Criminal organizations weren't just redirecting their operations, they were actively contributing to the security of her region, recognizing that the presence of a formidable guardian actually enhanced their ability to operate elsewhere without drawing excessive attention. "Your mother did something remarkable," Sarah continued, watching the sleeping infant. "She showed the world that true innovation doesn't come from having the most resources or the most advanced technology. It comes from having an absolute commitment to protecting what matters most." Emily moved to the window, surveying land that had become more than just a ranch. The double R had transformed into a symbol of how perceived vulnerability could become an unassailable strength when combined with purpose and innovation. But the real transformation wasn't in the sophisticated defensive systems or the tactical breakthroughs. It was in how one woman's stand had reshaped the fundamental dynamics of power along the border. "We're seeing something unprecedented," Blade reported. "Other communities are studying your example, not to replicate your technology, but to understand how purpose and preparation can overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. You didn't just defend your home, you created a new model for how determination and innovation can transform entire regions." The baby stirred, and Emily lifted her daughter with a gentleness that belied the strength that had turned their ranch into an impregnable fortress. "Your dad would be proud," she whispered, "not just of how we protected his dream, but of how we transformed it into something that protects others. Sometimes the greatest legacy isn't in what we build for ourselves, but in how we inspire others to find their own strength." Through her tactical displays, Emily watched as another cartel convoy diverted its route to maintain distance from their region. But the respect they showed wasn't born from fear of her defensive capabilities. It came from understanding that they had encountered something more formidable than mere military power. They finally understood. Viper's voice came through her, quantum-encrypted channel, carrying the wisdom of someone who had learned a profound truth through direct experience. True strength isn't in the weapons we carry or the resources we command. It's in having something worth fighting for and the innovative determination to ensure its protection no matter the odds. Sarah moved to stand beside Emily, both women, watching the Texas sun illuminate a landscape that had been transformed not by force, but by the power of showing the world that vulnerability could become an unassailable strength when combined with purpose and preparation. "Your daughter," Sarah observed, "will grow up knowing something remarkable about strength. Not just from the stories of how her mother defended this land, but from seeing how one person's commitment to protecting what matters most can change the way entire organizations view power and vulnerability." Emily held her daughter close, feeling the perfect trust of a child who would grow up protected, not just by sophisticated technology and tactical innovation, but by the profound truth her mother had demonstrated, that true strength comes from having something worth protecting, and the unwavering determination to ensure its safety. "The most powerful legacy," Emily whispered to her sleeping child, "isn't in the battles we win or the innovations we create. It's in showing others that real strength often comes from what others perceive as weakness. Your dad understood that. It's why he chose this land, why he dreamed of raising a family here. We didn't just protect his dream, we transformed it into something that protects and inspires others." The Texas sun continued its arc across a sky that watched over a region forever changed by one woman's stand. But the real transformation wasn't in the sophisticated defensive systems or the tactical breakthroughs. It was in demonstrating that the most formidable power often comes from having something worth protecting and the innovative determination to ensure its safety no matter the odds. Emily Reeves stood in her nursery, holding her daughter while maintaining awareness of the sophisticated security systems that protected them. But her true strength wasn't in the technology she'd developed or the tactical brilliance she'd demonstrated. It was in showing the world that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one you've already dismissed as vulnerable, especially when they're fighting to protect something more precious than mere territory or power. The Double R Ranch had become more than just a defended homestead. It had transformed into a symbol of how purpose and innovation could overcome any obstacle, inspiring others to find their own strength in what others might perceive as weakness. And in her daughter's peaceful sleep, Emily saw the ultimate truth. That the greatest power isn't in making others fear your strength, but in showing them why protecting what matters most can transform not just a single ranch, but the fundamental dynamics of power itself. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.